You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and I need to give you an update to the Larry Nassar story because a massive amount of money has been awarded. But I'm so bothered by saying the Larry Nassar story. It's not about him. It's about young women who were exploited and abused. It's about a system that allowed the abuse to happen. It's about investigators who didn't do their jobs. So it's not about him. He just happens to be the perpetrator who for years got away with harming vulnerable young girls and women. So please remember that as I say his name way too many times while telling this story. All right, let's roll it from the very beginning. Larry Nassar was a family medical physician who, through his career, found himself as the United States women's national gymnastics team doctor. But his career began at Michigan State University, where he worked as an assistant professor. He had access to young athletes in that position. Then he began working with the gymnastics team in 1986. And there, he had access to young athletes. Then just 2 years later, he began working at Twisters, which is a gymnastics training club. And true to his MO, there he had access to young athletes. And then he became the team doctor for Holt High School in 1996. And there he had access to young athletes. His work with the USA Gymnastics team spanned 2 decades. It was in the 90s when complaints about Nassar started to accumulate. But those complaints went wholly ignored. As the victims piled up for the next 20 years, Nassar was allowed unfettered access to children who were training for hours at a time away from their parents. Finally, it took reporting by the Indianapolis Star in 2016, and that reporting shed light on this abuse. In those stories, Rachel Denhollander and also another former gymnast, they accused Nassar of sexual abuse. Following those shocking articles, Nassar was fired from Michigan State. Yet, the USA Gymnastics team did not follow suit for 2 more years. He kept his job for 2 more years, surrounded by young girls. Now, during that time, another set of journalists at 60 Minutes interviewed Jeanette Antolin, Jessica Howard, and Jamie Dancher. All 3 claimed Nassar had sexually abused them. These 3 women went a step further, though. They also alleged emotional abuse at the hands of the famous coaching duo, Bella and Marta Karolyi. The 3 women stated to 60 Minutes that the Karolyis allowed Nassar opportunities to take advantage of the gymnasts. They said the Karolyis also created an environment where the gymnasts weren't really allowed to speak up or advocate for themselves. Then in 2017, the court cases started to shed light on more abuse. The first of those cases was the Rachel Denhollander case. She testified that Nassar abused her 5 times during various doctor's visits. And during that abuse, Rachel said she was 15 years old and that Nassar would use his ungloved hand to perform physical therapy by inserting his hand in her vagina. More impact statements came forward expressing similar situations. Girls saying that he called this vaginal manipulation pressure point therapy. He said it would possibly help relieve pain. Nassar was so swift and secretive with the manipulation that he could accomplish the act even when a parent was in the room. Then in October of 2017, the biggest name yet started revealing her abuse. Olympic gold medalist Michaela Maroney began using the hashtag #MeToo on her Twitter account. In her posts, she wrote that Nassar had repeatedly molested her, starting clear back in 2008 when she was just 13 years old. She said the abuse lasted for 8 years. Michaela then went on to file suit against Nassar, but she also filed suit against Michigan State and the United States Olympic Committee and USA Gymnastics. Michaela eventually settled that lawsuit for $1.25 million, but she refused to stay quiet about the abuse. 3 months later, in January of 2018, Maggie Nichols, who is a former teammate of Michaela's, she came forward with her story of abuse. Maggie said Nassar began grooming her on Facebook by complimenting her and striking up a relationship. She was 15 years old at the time. And then, this is when it was earth-shattering because the biggest name came forward. Simone Biles in 2018, she stated that Nassar had abused her also. Now, all of these abuse claims led to Nassar being indicted on several sexual assault charges, and they spanned from the years of 1998 to 2005. Nassar bonded out of jail on the same day he was charged. He pled not guilty to all of those charges, but then he was rearrested because the FBI found 37,000 images of child pornography on his computer. Now, the FBI agents also found video of Nassar molesting underage girls. He was denied bail on these charges, and he remained in federal prison while the other cases developed. 1 year later, Nassar pleaded guilty to receiving child pornography and possession of child porn. He was sentenced to 60 years in federal prison in late 2017. At nearly the same time of the federal sentencing, Nassar then went on to plead guilty to molesting 7 girls at Michigan State University. Then just 1 month later, are you ready for this? 1 month later, it was revealed that 135 women had accused Nassar of sexual assault while he worked for USA Gymnastics. 135. Now, once that was revealed, 15 more women came forward to a total of 150 assault claims. 3 months later, a judge ruled on his guilty plea for the 7 young girls at Michigan State University who said they were abused by Nassar. For that one, he was sentenced to 40 years in state prison. Okay, that added on to his previous sentencing of 60 years. So at this point, it's clear Nassar would die while imprisoned. But the judge added an additional sentencing requiring Nassar to register as a sex offender. And that move was purely symbolic, but a move I think was very important. Then a judge sentenced Nassar in a separate case to 40 more years in prison, and that case involved 3 other women. Now, none of these prison sentences brought real justice to the USA Gymnastics abuse. And there really wasn't a strong justice served until just recently. But I do want to point out that 150 federal and state lawsuits were filed against Nassar. But it also wasn't against just him. Those lawsuits included Michigan State, the USA Olympic Committee, and USA Gymnastics, and of course, Twister's Gymnastics Club. Eventually, all 18 members of the USA Gymnastics Board resigned. And the MSU president and MSU director of athletics, well, they also resigned. MSU agreed to pay $500 million to 332 of Nassar's alleged victims. But to be honest, that really didn't make waves until the HBO documentary At the Heart of Gold was released. And that happened in 2019. It chronicled the abuse and cover-ups at the various institutions. And then a Netflix documentary titled Athlete A, well, that was released in 2020, and even more awareness came to the abuses. So why am I telling you this story as a news update? Well, on Tuesday, another exclamation point was added to the injustice that is the Larry Nassar and USA Gymnastics abuse. The U.S. Department of Justice announced a settlement of nearly $139 million that will be awarded to more than 100 people. Now, those women who were abused, well, they had filed a lawsuit against the FBI for grossly mishandling the abuse claims, specifically the claims that were alleged and eventually substantiated in the years of 2015 and 2016. Now, the filers of the lawsuit said that the FBI ignored and mishandled the claims, which allowed Nassar's abuses to go unchecked during that time frame. And this settlement, well, it now makes the total awarded more than $1 billion to Nassar's victims. Acting Associate Attorney General Benjamin Miser said Nassar betrayed the trust of those in his care for decades, and that the abuse allegations should have been taken seriously from the beginning. Okay, I'm just going to take a brief pause here to remind you, some of those claims began clear back in 1994 and 1995. That was the beginning. But it wasn't taken seriously until about 2016. Now, most were ignored, and most of them were explained away. The acting AG then said that the settlements won't undo the harm that Nassar inflicted, but that the Department of Justice hopes that the money will give the victims of the crimes some critical support as they continue to heal. Now, you might be remembering this specific lawsuit against the FBI. I want you to think back to Simone Biles, Ali Raisman, and Michaela Maroney testifying in a Senate hearing in 2021. Okay, just take a moment to listen to Simone Biles during that hearing.
It is the power of that statement that compels and empowers me to be here in front of you today. I don't want another young gymnast, Olympic athlete, or any individual to experience the horror that I and hundreds of others have endured before, during, and continuing to this day in the wake of the Larry Nassar abuse. To be clear,
Take your time.
To be clear, I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse. USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee knew that I was abused by their official team doctor long before I was ever made aware of their knowledge. In May of 2015, Rhonda Fayen, the former head of USA Gymnastics women's program, was told by my friend and teammate, Maggie Nichols, that she suspected I, too, was a victim. I didn't understand the magnitude of what all was happening until the Indianapolis Star published its article in the fall of 2016, entitled, "Former USA Gymnastics Doctor Accused of Abuse." Yet while I was a member of the 2016 U.S. Olympic team, neither USAG, USOPC, nor the FBI ever contacted me or my parents. While others had been informed and investigations were ongoing, I had been left to wonder why I was not told until after the Rio Games.
Now, at the time, FBI Director Christopher Wray, he apologized to the women, saying that so many people let the women down over and over again. He then said he was especially sorry that the FBI had their own chance to stop the monster clear back in 2015, and yet they failed. I can't help but feel like the USA Gymnastics program and its misdeeds were basically untouchable for so many years. And I have massive respect for the courage of these women to sound the alarm, but more importantly, the courage to relive the horrors in order for the abuse to be stopped, to relive the horrors each time they had to testify or speak. I couldn't help but notice that during her opening statements to Congress, Simone Biles she was so uncomfortable and she was fidgety and she kept tucking her hair behind her ear. It's such a stark contrast to the confident woman who owns the gymnastics world. Abuse can destroy even the most talented, the most deserving, and the most hardworking. Imagine what it does to those who have no outlet or voice. Okay, let's head on over to Kentucky, where a doctor tried to have her ex-husband killed simply because she didn't like the custody agreement. Dr. Stephanie Russell, she's a successful pediatrician and the owner of Kids Are Life Pediatrics in Prospect, Kentucky. Well, her and her husband, Rick Crabtree, were the parents of 2 children. When the marriage began to fail, it seems Stephanie decided to just take some extreme measures. This was all happening back in November of 2019, when the almost 50-year-old wife and mother filed a complaint with the Louisville Metro Police Department. That complaint accused her husband, Rick, of abusing their 2 children. Well, the LMPD interviewed Rick, and he denied the abuse allegations, but he also spilled the beans about Stephanie trying to kill him. Rick told the police that he and Stephanie were in a dispute about who would have custody of the children upon their divorce, and he believed that she was going to attempt to hire someone to kill him. And he came with receipts. Rick's attorney had a sworn affidavit from the couple's nanny who was claiming that Stephanie had approached her more than once with questions about how to get rid of Rick. When the nanny was interviewed by police, she initially told them that she actually thought Stephanie was joking. Maybe she's just a wife that's fed up with her soon-to-be ex-husband. But the nanny then said after Stephanie's comments took a more sinister tone, she became concerned for Rick's safety. The nanny said Stephanie asked her if she knew any really bad people who could get rid of her by now ex-husband. She even had requests like when and where the killing would take place. Well, the LMPD, they didn't share what they knew with Stephanie. Instead, they called the FBI, and they brought them up to speed on the deadly plans they felt that Stephanie was trying to hatch. Well, the FBI, in several attempts, tried to produce additional evidence to support the claims that Stephanie was trying to have her husband killed, but nothing more substantial could be uncovered. And the FBI didn't just believe Rick Crabtree either. They looked into Stephanie's claims of Rick abusing the children. And in that case, they couldn't uncover anything there either. Maybe this was just a story of two toxic people in a toxic relationship. Now, during all of this, the divorce was granted, and Rick was awarded full custody of the two children, and Stephanie was granted supervised visitation each week. But after some further tips, the FBI reopened their investigation into the couple in March of 2022. Now, those additional tips came via a private investigator that had been hired by Rick Crabtree. And that private investigator became privy to another alleged murder for hire plot, except this time it wasn't through the nanny. Instead, an employee at the Kids Are Life Pediatrics told the private investigator that they discovered that Stephanie was asking multiple employees about locating a hitman to kill Rick. When the FBI contacted this witness, the worker said Stephanie had attempted to solicit two nurses at the pediatric office requesting assistance in her ex-husband's murder. And the solicitation happened more than once. The worker also provided screenshots to the FBI of text messages between Stephanie and one of those employees. In those messages, Stephanie allegedly uses the code words Christmas flowers to cryptically refer to the act of killing Rick. In the messages, she would write that she wanted to hire someone to deliver Christmas flowers to Rick, and that allegedly meant killing him. Now, the FBI then uncovered a second witness who told the federal agents that Stephanie was asking the witness to help her with a contract killing because she needed to get rid of her ex-husband who was sexually abusing their children. And then the FBI discovered that Stephanie had allegedly purchased a burner phone. This was to help aid her murder for hire plot. Now, this burner phone was used for communication between Stephanie and the second witness, and this all happened between the weeks of December 5th and December 28th of 2021. During those weeks, these two people shared text messages about possibly hiring someone from the witness's past that could potentially kill Rick. That witness told FBI agents that she told Stephanie that if they found a so-called hitman, then that hitman would charge $4,000 for the service, and that the total would have to be paid upon completion of the kill. Well, that wasn't enough for Stephanie because she sweetened the deal. She said she would add an additional $1,000 if the hitman would complete the job by December 12th of 2021. Now, the texts also revealed that Stephanie allegedly didn't care how the kill was fulfilled. She just wanted a certain location and time. The witness then told the FBI that she tried to break off contact with Stephanie by saying that they couldn't use the hitman that she knew because that hitman had actually died, but Stephanie didn't let it go. The witness said Stephanie allegedly told her that she would just pull the trigger herself. Now, the witness then admitted that this concerned her so much, she left her employment at the pediatrician's office. After she left her job, the witness heard from another employee who had given information to the FBI. So that was the first witness that we were talking about. The second witness heard from the first witness. And what she heard was that Stephanie was up to her old tricks and had now approached a new employee of the Kids Are Life pediatric staff and asked that new employee if she could help her arrange a hit on her ex-husband. Oh my goodness, let's pause for a second just to recognize that being discreet is not one of Stephanie's strong points. Okay, back to the story. Now, the second witness reconnected with Stephanie and gave her the number to the undercover FBI agent who was posing as a hitman. And Stephanie just could not resist. She called the undercover agent, thinking she was calling a hitman, and she divulged that she wanted her ex-husband to be killed and for it to look like a suicide. She also asked specific questions of the so-called hitman, like, what is your success rate? And do you have a guarantee clause? Well, that undercover agent responded that she did have an 85% success rate when it comes to killing someone. Stephanie also requested that the supposed hitman force her ex-husband to pen a suicide note prior to the killing. But that wasn't all. She now wanted the suicide note to have an apology for Stephanie included in the forced writings. Well, the undercover agent told Stephanie that she wouldn't be able to get a handwritten note from Rick, but the hitman would use Rick's phone to text Stephanie a fake suicide/apology note once the killing was completed. Now, the undercover agent also asked for $7,000 instead of the initial $5,000 because of this added on service. And Stephanie, she was all in. She allegedly left a payment of $3,500 in the lab specimen drop box that was located at the front of the pediatric office. She also provided that FBI agent with a code so that the money could be retrieved from the drop box. Well, when all of this went down, Stephanie was arrested by FBI agents in May of 2022. After she was arrested, more text messages surfaced. This time, the texts were to a spiritual worker, and Stephanie was requesting that this spiritual worker place a death spell on Rick. Stephanie was also reaching out to someone named SK, who was advising Stephanie that if she had Rick killed, it would harm her and her family because Rick had some sort of spiritual protection on him. Okay, these text messages, well, they led some to think that maybe the defense would use these texts to show that Stephanie was maybe mentally not well. I can get it. She's clearly believing in spiritual hexes. So why not claim mental illness? And guess what? That's exactly what happened. The trial was pushed back twice, once in November and once in January, because of motions that were filed that would change the way the charges would be addressed. Well, finally on Monday, the trial was set to start. And everyone, the media, the state, the judge, everyone thought that was exactly what was going to happen. But Stephanie threw another curveball. She pleaded guilty to hiring a hitman to kill her ex-husband and also to aiding and abetting interstate stalking. The last-minute plea led experts to believe that when her allegations of physical and sexual abuse were rejected by family courts and then ultimately by the federal judge, and then also that the defense had little else to work with, that's why she pleaded guilty. And you might be asking now where that stalking charge came from. Well, it was released that Stephanie participated in stalking clear back at the beginning of the child custody case. It was alleged that she hired someone with the initials JS to travel from Michigan to Kentucky and to perpetrate a harassment campaign. JS would pretend to be a local news reporter, and using a burner phone, the fake reporter would barrage Rick with defamatory allegations of misconduct. So JS went on to leave Rick accusatory voicemails from that burner phone that was purchased for JS by Stephanie. JS also entered Rick's garage and pretended to be a reporter, warning Rick that he was going to write a derogatory story that would involve Rick. Now, this fake reporter also left flyers on cars around Rick's office that had Rick's picture and other personal information on it. And the flyers, they also contained defamatory allegations of misconduct. And the intent was for Rick's coworkers, supervisors, and potential clients to read the negative concepts about Rick. That's how she got that stalking charge. Now, for the guilty plea, Stephanie will face up to 15 years in prison, but she will not be sentenced until July of 2024. The plea deal stated that the defense agreed to not seek less than 8 years in prison, and the state agreed to not ask for more than 12 years in federal prison. Of course, in this state, the judge will be the one to determine the sentencing in this case, and that judge can also reject the plea, but that seems very unlikely. And now this story that makes all the fear tactics that parents use with kids, it gives them legitimacy. we need to head over to Webster, Massachusetts, where a 68-year-old man used a dog to lure a 13-year-old girl into his car on Monday, April 15th. Okay, here's how it went down. According to the statements that the 13-year-old girl gave police, and I'm going to call this 13-year-old girl Jane. Well, she said she was at Memorial Beach when 68-year-old Walter Fanian called to Jane, enticing her with a dog that he had near him and his car. When she neared the man, Jane told police Walter grabbed her and put her in his car. Jane said she tried to scream, but Walter covered her mouth. While parked at the beach, Jane said the man kissed and groped her. He then allegedly drove off with Jane passing through the towns of Dudley and Thompson, Connecticut. So this gets bad because he crossed state lines. While driving through one of these towns, Jane claims Walter sexually assaulted her. Walter also allegedly dropped the dog off at his nephew's house in Dudley. You guys, he borrowed the dog to allegedly lure a young girl into his car. Jane also said that while in Dudley, Walter sexually assaulted her again. Jane said he then drove her home with the promise that he'd be back at the beach the next day. Well, brave Jane told her grandmother what had happened, and Grandma took Jane to the police to report the incident. Police said in a statement that they had Jane return to the beach the next day at the time that Walter allegedly said he would be there. And guess what? He was there. And Jane, according to police, had already given the authorities specific details about Walter's car and about Walter. So when he showed up in that car, police began monitoring him. And then a few days later, he was arrested. The Webster, Massachusetts police chief is urging parents to talk to their kids about stranger danger, or if you're a listener of Murder with My Husband, strangey dangy. And the chief also highlighted the strength of Jane being so young, yet so courageous about coming forward with this information. Boston 25 is reporting that Walter is still being held in jail and that he has a hearing scheduled for tomorrow to determine his future. And let's end with the fact that this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. The theme this year is, how would you help? And the theme is asking everyone, and that includes all of us interested in true crime, to think about how we can help victims. So I want you to think of concepts like, how would I help if someone confided in me about physical or sexual abuse? Or maybe a concept like, is my business or my workplace filled with healthy behaviors or potentially unhealthy behaviors? And how could I address that? For me, I serve on a board of directors for the Regional Child Abuse Advocacy Center, but I know I could do more. So I challenge myself and I challenge you. Ask yourself, how can you help? If you would like to review resource material provided by the government, you can visit ovc.ojp.gov. That's ovc.ojp.gov. Or you could just search National Crime Victims' Rights Week Resource Guide on the internet. Well, that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. Please help this podcast grow by liking and subscribing on all of the various platforms. And 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. And if you're attending the Murder with My Husband live show in Phoenix tonight, come say hi. I'll be there with Peyton and Garrett. And if not, you can join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.